Hey there everybody, Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. Today, after yesterday's lengthy Alice Cooper show with all those albums, I needed like a short palate cleanser for today. So what I did was I decided to choose a band that has a very short, manageable discography. Shouldn't take too long to get through these. I'm talking about Britain's Atomic Rooster. All right, some of you might be saying, Atomic who? Who's the Rooster? Atomic Rooster, all right? A sort of a kind of like a cult band from the early mid-70s. Or, well, actually, they were around throughout the 70s, kind of little stops and starts a few times, but a very cool band. Never a big seller, all right? Kind of like an underground band, maybe a little bit more than that. Prog rock band, certainly. Hard rock band, certainly. Proto-metal in spots, kind of. Even like a kind of funky, bluesy rock band at times as well. Yep, they kind of did all those things. Led by Vincent Crane, okay, mastermind of the band on the Hammond organ, okay, sometimes vocals, piano, synths, occasional bass, that sort of thing. The band was formed in the late 60s by Mr. Crane and none other than Carl Palmer, as both guys were in the Crazy World of Arthur Brown band, decided to leave Arthur's group, form their own band, boom, Atomic Rooster. Of course, Mr. Palmer's time in Atomic Rooster would be somewhat brief, as he would go on to help form Emerson, Lake and Palmer, obviously. But some cool albums here. Basically, every album is very, well, for the most part, most albums are pretty different from each other. They kind of, the first couple albums pretty similar, and the next couple of albums kind of similar, and then the later albums a little bit different, so like each little pairing of albums kind of differed from the last. So what I'm going to do, as always, is I'm going to start off from my least favorite, go to my favorite, okay? And I'd urge any of you who are fans, hey, if you've never heard Atomic Rooster before, here's your chance to go and investigate their music, all right? If you know Atomic Rooster well, let's see your rankings. Or maybe if you're someone who kind of knows Atomic Rooster a little bit but hasn't listened to in quite a while, now's the time to go back and dig out those albums, right? All right, so starting first, we're going to go with Nice and Greasy from 1973. Okay. This is, I believe the third lineup, or was it the fourth? The fourth lineup of the band. All right, and Vincent Crane, always the guy at the helm, but he would, make all sorts of changes along the way. This album is kind of notable for, I'm trying to remember what the pseudonym that he used. Let's see if I can see. So we got Vincent Crane on Hammond organ, electric and acoustic piano, synths, all right. Chris Farlow on lead vocals. So Chris joined a year before, and he came over from Coliseum, and Chris Farlow, more of like a kind of a bluesy soul singer, kind of different for Atomic Rooster, and we'll kind of talk more about this as we go on here. A guy named Johnny Mandala on electric guitar. Some of you are probably thinking, who the hell is Johnny Mandala, right? Well, none other than John Goodsall from Brand X. Okay, but apparently due to contractual obligations, he could not use his real name, so he went by the name of Johnny Mandala. Rick Parnell on drums, okay, and that makes up this lineup of the band. So this is by far my least favorite Atomic Rooster album. Here is where, this album and the one that came before it is where the band trying to kind of do this like kind of groove-laden, funky rhythm and bluesy rock type of thing. And I think Vincent Crane wanted to kind of do something a little bit different from the band's earlier, heavier, more progressive material. But I think having Chris Farlow in the band certainly kind of helped steer them down that track. Unfortunately, you got John Goodsall on here, who's a fantastic guitar player if you've ever listened to his amazing fusion band, Brand X. But, man, he's got very little to do on here. So, for me, a couple of all right songs, all across the country is decent. Voodoo and You is pretty good. The rest of it just kind of forgettable. Next up, we're going to go to Made in England from 1972. All right, this is the debut album with Chris Farlow in the lead vocal slot. Okay, this is a much better album in my opinion than the one that comes after it. Time Is My Life is pretty strong. All in Satan's Name is a killer hard rock tune. People You Can't Trust is very good too. Close Your Eyes I like quite as well. And Space Cowboy is a very good song. So again, this album contains a little bit of the kind of harder rock style of the albums before it, but you can clearly hear the direction going into more, kind of. For me, it's almost like when Deep Purple, when Gillan and Glover left, and Coverdale and Glenn Hughes came into the band, where they moved from the kind of early heavy rock stuff to more bluesier, funkier directions. Very similar here, although even more drastic. All right, next up, I'm going to go with their last album from 1983, Headline News. This album has some good tracks. This is basically Vincent Crane and a whole bunch of cast of characters. So on guitar, you've got guesting David Gilmour on a couple tracks from Pink Floyd. You've got Bernie Tormé, obviously from the Gillan band at the time. You got who else we have on here? Paul Hammond on drums, longtime drummer for the band. Who else? Anybody else of note here? Tarina Crane, Vincent's wife, on backing vocals. She helped co-write a couple tunes. That's basically the band right here. My problem with this album, and there's a couple good songs on here. I think, again, I'm terrible with the song titles. Land of Freedom, good track. Metal Minds is cool. Hold Your Fire and Headline News, the first two tracks on here. Very strong. Time Is Not Bad. Carnival. My problem with this album is that it's very inconsistent. A lot of different styles on the album. You got some cool hard rock tunes. You got some kind of like early 80s, just kind of like bland, like kind of almost stuff that they thought would be, radio fodder. Doesn't really work. And, they've got two kick-ass guitar players in Tormé and Gilmour on here, and they have very little to do. There's very few guitar solos on here, or really, really interesting guitar riffs or things. I just think that it was a kind of like wasted opportunity. You got those two cats on board, man. You got, come on, pair them up with Vincent Crane's ripping Hammond organ, and let's show some stuff. But so an okay album. Unfortunately, this was to be their last studio album, and kind of went out with a whimper there. Faring a little better is self-titled from 1980. So this reunites Crane with John Hammond on drums and John Ducan on guitar and vocals. So that was not the original, but the classic trio lineup from some of the earlier stuff. And this, to me, is more of a return to form, but they would not stick together as a unit for very, very long. So it kind of like came and went. But In the Shadows is a kick-ass tune. Lost in Space, They Took Control Over You. She's My Woman is really good. Don't Lose Your Mind. Back to more of the kind of progressive, crunchy blues rock stuff that they did earlier in their career. So I kind of dig that. All right, coming in at number 3, we're going to go to In Hearing Of. All right. This, of course, is a Roger Dean artwork configuration there. So this has got basically that original trio that we just talked about, okay, with, God, I'm forgetting his name. Hold on for a second here. Hold on, the vocalist, Mr. French. What is his first name? Pete French on vocals. Okay, so Pete French, formerly of Cactus, as well as Leafhound, came into the band briefly here to sing on this album. This is a pretty good album, but here you're starting to detect the shift into more kind of calmer, bluesier, funkier waters, okay? But some very strong material on here. Less reliant on the big, heavy guitar riffs matching the big, heavy Hammond organ, right? More subtlety to the music. But French, a very good singer, fits in very well here. Breakthrough is a kick-ass tune. Break the Ice I Love. The incredible instrumental, A Spoonful of Bromide Helps the Pulse Rate Go Down. Yes, that's the song title. Killer tune. telling you, check it out. Very good. Black Snake is awesome. Then you got a couple instrumentals towards the end of the album, The Rock and The Price. But also, not on the original LP, but released as a single at the same time, included on the CD, is Devil's Answer, which is a really cool hard rock tune. So I like this album a lot. Again, not as heavy as the two that came before it, but pretty sophisticated, and I think works really well with some really good songs. John Ducan and Paul Hammond, John Ducan and Pete French would be gone after they record the album. So next up, I'm going to go with their debut, okay, which is simply called Atomic Rooster. All right, so this is the album released in 1970. That's got Carl Palmer on it. In fact, there he is, right there. Vincent Crane. This, a very strange history about this band. So they recorded the album as a trio with those two guys, along with, hold on a second, I'll get his name here. Nick Graham, okay, who is playing bass for them and going to be singing. Well, after they recorded the album and released it in the UK, Graham leaves the band. They bring in John Ducan on guitars and vocals, also plays bass, and they decided to then, for the US version, kind of not so much re-record the album, but have John Ducan add his vocals and play guitar with all the songs, over all the songs. And then they decided for the second pressing of the UK release, instead of releasing the original, they just released the US version that was kind of remade with John Ducan. So now you've got the trio of Ducan, Hammond, and Crane, which basically is the classic lineup of the band, because Carl Palmer was on this first album, also on both the UK and the US release. All right, but then Palmer left, Hammond came in, trying to get all the facts straight here, and that makes up the lineup for the next album, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But this is a very, very strong album that kind of, probably their most proggy album, I would say. You know, you got, but still a lot of those kind of hard rock elements going on here. Friday the 13th, a killer song. All right, Broken Wings, it's a lengthy remake of a John Mayall track. Before Tomorrow, excellent. All right. SLY, Winter, Bandstead, a lot of really good tunes. Play the Game, Decline and Fall, a very strong track, and yeah, it's a pretty kooky cover artwork there, right? But a very good album, But there can only be one favorite for me here, and that it released the same year. They kind of followed that up really quickly in 1970 with Death Walks Behind You, their iconic album. This is their proto-metal album. This is a heady album, all right? It's proggy, too. So that's why a lot of people, they talk about early Atomic Rooster. Well, are they a prog band or were they a proto-metal band? They kind of did both. This album is absolutely spectacular. Molten riffs, crazy lead solos, smoldering Hammond organ, right? Acrobatic drums, memorable tunes, great riffs, and one anthem after another. You got Death Walks Behind You, the title track. Absolutely killer. All right. You got Vug. Man, totally acrobatic, complex, man. Great. Tomorrow Night, which I believe was their single off this album. Very catchy, very cool tune. 7 Streets. Sleeping for Years. I Can't Take No More, Nobody Else. And the great Gershafter, however they say that. Good mix of great vocal tunes, couple instrumentals, blazing instrumental passages on here. The musicianship is just absolutely stellar. If you love kind of early 70s distorted bluesy guitar riffs and solos, you're going to love Ducan's work on here. Absolutely amazing. So that's my order, okay, for the Atomic Rooster catalog. If you love the studio stuff, or if you're just kind of getting into it, there is a ton of archival live releases from the band from all throughout their career. So go investigate those afterwards. But my number 1, Death Walks Behind You. Number 2, Atomic Rooster, self-titled. Number 3, In Hearing Of. Number 4, Atomic Rooster, self-titled. Okay, so yeah, actually they got 2 albums called Atomic Rooster, believe it or not. Go figure. What was I up to? 4, 5, headline news. Number 6, made in England. And number 7, nice and greasy. All right. There you have it. A very cool band. If you're honestly, if you're asking me, Pete, well, I only can afford 3 of their albums. Which should I get? Get the first 3. They're head and shoulders the best. So it's In Hearing Of, the first one, self-titled, and Death Walks Behind You. There are a lot of good songs on these other albums, but I wouldn't say any of those 4 are mandatory listening by any means. But these 3 absolutely are. So there you have it. Go investigate some Atomic Rooster. Put your comments and feedback below on which songs or which albums you like, or which songs you like, or both, or which ones don't you like, what your opinions are. I'd love to hear, especially if any of you guys, maybe a little older than me, who got to see the band back in the day, would love to hear those stories, right? So remember, respect everybody's opinions. We all like different stuff, so your order does not have to match mine by any means, right? So there's no right or wrong answers here, so please give some positive comments about what you like about Atomic Rooster or what you don't. All right. I'm amazed at some of the comments I've been seeing lately. Just people who get so hung up on the way that I rank things that all they want to do is like poke fun at my choices. It's like, but you're not telling us what you like. All right. You're hung up on the fact that I listed something at number 15 when you think it should be at number 2. Who cares? But let's hear yours, all right? Most of those people who bitch and moan about stuff like that never give their listings, never give their rankings, never tell us that all they want to do is complain about the way I rank them. It's like, you know what? We all rank things differently, people. Get used to it. It's the way of the world, right? You don't like it, you don't like the way I rank things, and you can't just contribute something positive, don't watch. Go somewhere else, right? That's very easy to do. All right, we have plenty of people here who love this and share their own kind of history and likes and dislikes, and that's what it's meant to be. It's like people sitting at a bar or sitting at a restaurant, at a ball game, out by the fire, just talking about music and what we like, what we don't like, how we rank them, how we don't rank them. All right, it's just that's what it's all about. All right, so come on, everybody. Let's be adults here. This is on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're on YouTube all the damn time. So what do we got tomorrow, you might ask? Tomorrow, I'm going to be ranking the discography, the studio albums of Journey. So that's coming up tomorrow. Don't miss it. Till then, have a good night. We'll see you. Bye-bye.